Worldwide, 1 out of every 6 living people has an eye disease. Worldwide, 1 out of every 60 living people is blind. This is the international airport of the city of Canton in the People's Republic of China. This is the extraordinary location for a strange medical experiment in which East meets West in an attack on global blindness. Just 16 hours before the experiment was to start, on this American DC-8 in Canton, Nova finally got permission to enter China to film the story. The story is about Project Orbis. Project Orbis, it is claimed, could help cure many of the 500 million people on this earth who might be saved from blindness. The Chinese are very concerned about eye disease. Throughout the country, school children do eye exercises twice every day to control myopia. One result of this concern was the Chinese invitation to Orbis to visit them. In China, Project Orbis will face its biggest challenge, even though it's operated in 24 other countries across the world. In China, Project Orbis will have to deal with the sharp contrasts of an unfamiliar culture and a less developed economy and technology. Some critics will say that Project Orbis is not appropriate to what the Chinese really need. Supporters will say that it could be an extraordinary help for the Chinese in their efforts to push ahead. Certainly what you're about to see is one of the more bizarre accomplishments in medical history. The story begins back in Houston, Texas, with concern about the quality of American eye care. In America, more and more eye disease is being diagnosed and treated as ophthalmic techniques have become revolutionized in the past decade. And as people live longer, the incidence of this disease increases.
Okay, Mr. Adams, each time you see the light, press the button. Press even if you barely see it.
Yet, American eye doctors who graduated as recently as 1970 were not taught the use of today's more complex sight-saving techniques, like this computerized instrument which maps vision loss in a glaucoma patient. There's a fear that many American eye patients could be shut out from modern ophthalmology unless a process known as continuing medical education has successfully brought their doctors up to date. Part of this multi-million-dollar medical complex in Houston is the Cullen Eye Institute. This institute's former director became concerned that continuing medical education was no longer adequate. That director, Dr. David Payton, has stated, "The very heart of medical care is in jeopardy because of insufficient learning opportunities. Current continuing medical education grossly neglects a doctor's need for honing and modifying the raw skills and proficiencies that were his at the time of completing his training. The newer skills necessitate the guided learning of hands-on instruction. Some doctors perceived a crisis in American ophthalmology. Traditional continuing medical education was not effectively transferring the necessary new skills to practicing doctors. Hands-on learning in the operating room was needed. This perceived crisis evoked an extraordinary response. Project Orbis, a radical initiative undertaken by a group of dedicated ophthalmologists.
The concept was so new, was so absolutely unheard of, that many people felt that it just couldn't exist, that we were 10 years, maybe 20 years ahead of ourselves.
The concept was of a totally self-contained, up-to-the-minute operating room that would literally fly. New surgical skills would be transferred hands-on in an airplane. Nothing like this had ever been achieved or conceived of before. It took 8 years of effort, of evangelism and money-raising, to acquire the donation of an airliner and the necessary equipment. 8 years of designing, building, and refitting to develop the world's first flying, state-of-the-art eye operating theater. The result? A DC-8 with a totally self-contained operating room and an elaborate audiovisual teaching theater.
We probably ended up with the most sophisticated small hospital in the world. It is the most compact, highly technologic medical unit, perhaps in existence.
The Orbis people saw this as the solution to the ophthalmic crisis. The Project Orbis plane would fly across the country from city to city, bringing a nucleus of eye surgeons to work side by side with the local ophthalmologists in the aircraft's operating room. In each city, the latest surgical skills would be transferred from doctor to doctor through professional, hands-on learning.
Surgery, or any of the surgical techniques, has to be, and always has been, a hand-on expertise transfer type of system. It requires that the person actually, in most cases, I would say 95% of the cases, be on a one-to-one basis with the surgeon.
Here it was, an airplane operating room, a recovery room, a video teaching theater. A staff of 3 doctors, 4 nurses, 4 engineers and technicians, 3 pilots. Project Orbis, the solution to the American ophthalmic crisis. There was just one drawback with Project Orbis. It couldn't operate here in America. Medical licensing laws inhibit doctors from crossing state lines to take part in hands-on surgical training. It's ironic that American law forced this all-American concept outside the United States. Though conceived out of a need to further train American doctors, Project Orbis assumed a larger mission. It became ambassador to 24 countries like Pakistan, Morocco, Peru, Jamaica, and now China. But Orbis still had to prove itself. It had to show it could succeed in a country as different as this. So Orbis, with Western high technology, flew into the third world. It came with the latest expertise to an ancient civilization. It came with American attitudes to this people's republic. It brought a package of high hopes and medical ambitions which were debatably appropriate to this very different world of China. In many ways, China today is still struggling economically to enter the 20th century. The Chinese material standard of living is only 1/25 of America's. The average wage is $35 a month. With 5 times our population, China's gross national product is 1/5 of the United States. Yet in sharp contrast with America, China has had a 3,000-year continuity of language, culture, literature, and social customs. China is the only survivor of the great ancient agrarian civilizations like ancient Egypt or Mesopotamia. For 800 million peasants, working methods have changed little over the millennia. Yet today, 80% of the Chinese live in communes or agricultural townships, like this one near Canton. And in the People's Republic today, life expectancy has risen close to that of the industrialized nations. And with it, there has been an inevitable increase in eye problems. This is what Project Orbis is stepping into with its Western experiment in learning. Even as they descend like a contingent of JCs, the visitors have little idea of what to expect here. Yet the Chinese had invited Project Orbis. They rolled out their red carpet, and their leading ophthalmologists came to greet the foreigners.
Carol Pasolino, nice to meet you.
You're right.
Dr. Bill Jennings with audiovisual.
Fine.
Good to meet you, sir.
You have lots of whiskers and beard.
Yes, sir. Everybody's heard very wonderful things about you.
While the man who first conceived of Project Orbis, white-haired Dr. Peyton, made the historic trip to bring American state-of-the-art eye surgery to China.
Don't keep telling them that, because then they won't take any orders from me.
Yet how can Project Orbis expect to succeed in helping to overcome eye disease in a country so vast and different as this?
I think one of the basic premises of the entire Project Orbis is the so-called multiplier effect. And that is, if you hands-on teach an ophthalmologist a particular surgical technique or any type of technique in ophthalmology, that this ophthalmologist can then go and teach 2 others who can teach 2 others, and so on down throughout the entire ophthalmic community, for that matter.
To try to teach anything through an entire community in China is a daunting job. 4 out of every 5 Chinese live not in cities, but in the less accessible communes, like this. It is here that most Chinese must receive their medical care. This is a local commune clinic. Peasants who come here, when it opens after work hours, won't get expert diagnosis or treatment, but what they do get is a lot better than in the old days, when few peasants received any medical care at all. Serious cases, if detected, are normally referred up the system to the county hospital. Here, things are crowded. There's a lot of waiting about, but every single patient who comes here will be seen before the end of the day. There isn't much modern technology, but there is a sense of concern and dedication. This is the Zhongshan Eye Hospital in the city of Canton. Zhongshan Hospital is one of 4 specialist eye hospitals in China. This is the top of the Chinese medical ladder. There's a staff of 270, and 130,000 outpatients are treated each year. Their Their fee is 10 fen, or 5 cents each, for whatever course of treatment they may need. There are 3,000 inpatients a year. Inpatients pay 1 yuan, or 50 cents a day. Throughout the hospital, treatment and conditions appear to be uniform, 6 patients to a ward. In one bed, a university professor. In the next, a manual worker. From the patients in this hospital, Orbis and Chinese doctors will be selecting those whose sight might be saved by the techniques which the Chinese ask their visitors to demonstrate.
Dr. Lee?
This is the first full day in China for the Orbis doctors. They're at the eye hospital deciding, with the hospital's own doctors, which patients are suitable for treatment aboard Orbis.
So, can somebody organize a B scan for us tomorrow? Is that okay?
This is Dr. Kroc, an Australian Orbis visiting doctor. He's trying to schedule an ultrasound B scan for a patient's eye, a preliminary for the newly developed complex technique of implanting an artificial lens into the eye.
I think the thing is
For the Orbis doctors, there's an unfamiliar crush of people, language problems, and, for them, relatively primitive facilities.
much out of that. No, but you get a good view.
This is his only eye.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Kroc and an American, Dr. Harris, are discussing one of the cases.
Nuclear opacities. And then he's got a fibrous membrane with traction detachment in that eye. I don't see that yet.
Through the opacity, but not try to take away the whole opacity centrally.
With calcification. Yeah. He's 28 years old.
Can you describe his problem again?
He has bilateral hemorrhages in the vitreous, much more marked in the right eye than in the left. In the left eye, the local expert says that it's a condition called Eales disease.
Yes.
And I think he should do quite well with a simple vitrectomy on the right side.
Vitrectomy, which means emptying a diseased, clouded gel from the eye interior and replacing it with a clear artificial gel, is another new and complex operation. The Chinese asked to see advanced techniques, which they hadn't yet practiced in Canton: lens implants, vitrectomy, and corneal transplants. Chinese ophthalmologists have their hands full, performing perhaps millions of less sophisticated operations and working in preventive medicine and health education. They haven't had much chance to learn or practice the new and elaborate surgery.
They wonder whether this case should be performed vitrectomy as well as lancectomy. Yeah.
It is these new skills which the visitors would demonstrate when they transferred to the high technology of the Orbis operating room, far more elaborate than anything in the Canton hospital.
I think the main purpose of Project Orbis is to bring the high technology to the country. And we found in many of the countries that the operating rooms did not have the water pressure, they did not have the electrical support systems.
Project Orbis does have all the support systems. And on board, the selected patients will get the treatment they otherwise might never receive. At 9 o'clock, on Orbis's second morning in China, the second patient shuttles out from Zhongshan Hospital to the airport. Now, the Project Orbis concept is being put to the test. Will the team of Orbis and Chinese doctors be able to work together successfully in this hands-on skills transfer experiment? In the operation already underway, Dr. Kroc, the Orbis visitor from Australia, is doing a cataract removal and vitrectomy.
Here again, please.
Dr. Lee from Zhongshan assists.
Thanks, Dr. Lee.
and the Chinese professor Sen will help by interpreting. This is an extracapsular cataract extraction and a vitrectomy. That means that the diseased nucleus of the eye's lens will be taken out, leaving the back skin of the lens in place. This lessens the chance of complications. While during the vitrectomy, the blood-clotted gel of the inner eye would be removed and replaced by a clear solution. All this is very high-technology surgery, perfected only in the last 10 years. It needs not only the Orbis instruments, but also extensive training. Yet there can always be problems, even in the hands of experts, as Dr. Kroc explains to the translator.
Now you see we've got a little problem here, Professor.
What problem, excuse me?
Well, we forgot that we had the infusion on, and it caused a herniation of the iris.
啊，他说现在有点问题，这个虹膜有点散出来、凸出来了。
In this kind of teaching, the learner should take an active part in the operation. She should be involved with the surgeon's dexterity, with his accomplishments and his difficulties, as well as her own.
You let go, Dr. Lee. Let go, please. Just let go, Dr. Lee. Go away, please. Release. Release. How do I explain to Doctor that grip machine right in my line of sight? Could you ask Doctor not to... No. Just single drops. And also make sure that they're not... It's not in my line of sight. Now I can't see, you see. I can't see. See?
Despite the difficulties, the operation progresses. Learning how to recover from mistakes is one of the major processes of hands-on skill transfer. But all is now going smoothly, and Dr. Kroc is ready to remove the cataract nucleus.
Now I'm just lifting the nucleus out with the victus.
现在把那个核拿出来了啊。
So right to the 909.
Unfortunately, only a few doctors can get to work together in surgery on Orbis. A couple more can watch the operating room monitor, projecting what the surgeon is actually seeing through his operating microscope. While in what used to be the first-class cabin, Project Orbis has its own video theater. Here, 24 doctors, who might never get the chance of actually working in the Orbis operating room, can get some feeling for what it's like in there. This is real-time television taken from the operating microscope. The Chinese commentary is a translation of the surgeon's comments. These doctors can even talk back directly to the surgeon to ask questions or make suggestions, though language or culture seems to inhibit this here in China. But how useful can it really be simply to watch?
It's about the next best thing to actually putting your hand on the eye. You actually are there, the surgeon is making a commentary, he's telling you what he's feeling, what he's doing, why he's doing it, why he should probably have made that suture a slightly bit deeper, and so on and so forth. It's the next best thing, I think, to being right there.
But of course it isn't being right there. In fact, this is more like American continuing education, learning by watching rather than taking part. Though there is one big advantage, they're not looking at a film with the mistakes edited out. This is live. And for the Chinese, it's unique. There is no microscope television system like this in China. These doctors are getting their first surgeon's eye view of these new techniques. What's more, outside the plane, fed by direct cable, there's an overflow classroom. Some of the 70 or so Chinese ophthalmologists here have come thousands of miles to sit in this room. None of these doctors will get to work in surgery on Orbis. So this larger room is perhaps a next best to hands-on work. But here there is a grounding in procedures which these doctors might only have read about before. This next best group could be the nucleus of the multiplier effect Project Orbis talks about. In theory, these doctors could soon be doing a state-of-the-art operation like this anterior segment reconstruction.
I'm underneath the iris now, which is a little difficult area, but this is where you can see where we have another membrane yet behind that one, which I would assume to be probably the anterior hyaloid.
The anterior segment is the front part of the eye, the cornea, the iris, and the lens. This patient has a scar in this area from a cataract. The scarred membrane needs to be removed to open up a path for light to reach the retina nerves at the back of the eye.
I just made a dive into the back part of the eye. We have to go a little bit higher suction here because we have to suction in this, there we go. If we can just get a good, it's a little more dangerous with the higher suction because we can suck all this lens out and come out with a full iridectomy, but...
The surgeon is using an ocutone, the instrument on the right of the screen. It's a high-technology device, a thin tube with a tiny reciprocating edge which cuts and sucks away tissue. The other instrument infuses new fluid to replace what is lost.
Well, I think that probably should give her a pupil. I don't quite know whether it would dilate or not. She does have an optical zone now that goes straight down into her vitreous cavity, and I think this is probably enough for the time being because we've now reconstructed her anterior segment so that she does have access to the vitreous cavity. What remains in the vitreous cavity, of course, is something we probably would have to do in another day. Okay, so I think we'll just stop here.
If the few Chinese who do get to operate during the Orbis visit can in fact learn the new techniques, they could, in theory, pass these skills on to each of the doctors who is watching in the classroom. This would certainly break new ground, because today there is no system of further or continuing education for doctors in China at all. While for Project Orbis, it could demonstrate that its original American contention was correct, that direct hands-on work is vital to continuing education anywhere, and particularly back home in America.
If it works over there, it must work just as well, if not better, here. And what I'm saying is that I really think that more and more of this is going to be done in this country, and it's a ripe area for it to really happen.
Others say it just won't happen back in America, where too few doctors would devote the time for hands-on teaching. They say problems of patient consent and state medical licensing would always be too embedded to overcome. Many say there is no crisis in American continuing education, and that more hands-on just isn't needed.
The individual who requires and wants techniques can get those by attending at universities or at private courses that are set up around the country to learn those techniques. I think that there are sufficient courses within the United States. If you have a group of surgeons that already has some experience with the procedure, then you don't need that much of hands-on. You can almost see films and see what's trying to be done, and then you can learn the techniques to do that if you already have a basis for adding that information.
Despite what Orbis is doing in China, the American medical establishment seems to find little need for Orbis in America, though they see it in a more positive light, so long as it's operating overseas and serving local doctors.
In another country, those opportunities for education are missing. Well, in those countries, offering the availability of expertise and educational opportunities where it doesn't exist, I think is a tremendous asset. If you have none of the skills, then it requires more of your hands-on transference.
Ironically, then, American law and attitudes, by forcing Project Orbis to do its skills transfer work abroad, may have ensured that the project concentrates on those people who both need it and can benefit from it the most, while through the multiplier effect, the new techniques could, in theory, spread through the Chinese ophthalmologic system, from present to future generations of Chinese eye doctors.
是网络上呢有上学期经过发车以后，再拐个弯到这里挤在眼球的后段，谢谢。
But can this multiplier effect actually work in China? Is the system ready and able to absorb ultramodern ophthalmology, to acquire the expensive instruments this demands? Can high-technology ophthalmology be a top priority in China today? Mustn't more basic eye care come first?
那么这个视网膜的血管呢就不交叉，动脉一直往前走。
Certainly the Chinese eye care system is distinctly different from the West's. The operating rooms in the Zhongshan Hospital are austere. Few Chinese ophthalmologists do surgery with the expensive operating microscopes which have been used in America for the past 20 years. And while these instruments are adequate for the straightforward cataract operation they're doing, they're not sharp or delicate enough for more intricate work. This patient won't be getting a sophisticated lens implant or vitrectomy, though he will get his basic sight back. Chinese ophthalmologists do a volume business of skilled, if less dramatic, work. The Chinese produce and normally prescribe Western drugs. They may also combine traditional medicines with these drugs. In this section of the eye hospital pharmacy, herbal prescriptions are being made up. One prescription for conjunctivitis, for example, combines china root, mulberry leaves, cassia leaf, motherwort seeds, and skullcap root. While these traditional ingredients have been analyzed, for example, mulberry leaves contain aspirin, no research has yet isolated specific ingredients which can be directly related to the relief of particular eye problems. But then, the precise action of aspirin is not well understood either. Acupuncture treatment has a 2,000-year history. According to Chinese medical philosophy, it's intended to bring the body back to a healthy balance. This patient is being treated for atrophy of an optic nerve. Acupuncture needles are pressed and twirled into specific acupuncture points of what the Chinese call the body's energy system. This, the Chinese say, could help reverse the energy imbalance in this patient, of which his eye problem is a symptom. In another specifically Chinese treatment, they put a traditional herbal medicine on the eyelid of a patient and use electrolysis to induce it into the vitreous gel of the eye. This is intended to clear the eye of the blood clots which are destroying the patient's vision. If the technique were to work, it might do the same sort of job as the complex vitrectomy surgery, which has only been recently perfected in the West. Nevertheless, the Chinese seem to use this treatment only after other approaches have failed. The Chinese people get what medical help their state can give them. They can expect to get their share of what is available, neither more nor less. In America, it's different.
Hi, I'm Dr. Suflo, Mrs. Bassett.
Hi.
How are you?
Just fine.
For patients who can pay, there is the expectation of all possible state-of-the-art treatment in pleasant surroundings. This is a glaucoma test, using a tonometer to measure the pressure within the eye. It's important to diagnose this disease early by screening, for the symptoms aren't obvious until it might be too late to cure the disease.
Good. Hold on.
For those Americans who can't pay, treatment is usually available, if not as a right, then as a charity, especially when the patient is able to persist long enough.
No, with my new problem,
I don't follow
the
you.
sugar.
Okay. How long have you had problems with sugar?
Well, I see it's been about a month and a half.
Any other medical problems like high blood pressure?
Yes, I have migraine headaches, and I suffer with an ulcer on my leg, left leg.
Okay.
You name it, I got it.
Diagnosis and treatment might not normally be as elaborate and careful as in this clinic, but it should be helpful.
Right at my light. Right at it.
In China, expectations or demands are different. With 5 times the population and 1/5 the wealth of America, medical help is limited. Each patient stoically accepts their small fraction of what is available. Given these stark differences between American and Chinese health care, how appropriate can Project Orbis actually be to China's real health needs? Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva is the headquarters of the World Health Organization, the United Nations agency which fights disease worldwide with programs tailored to the needs of specific countries. Here, speaking personally, World Health Organization ophthalmologist questioned Project Orbis's objectives and appropriateness.
Appropriate to what? To certain objectives which exist both sides. Now, they are probably appropriate technology for those who offer. They are not necessarily appropriate for those who receive. You have to know what are you offering, and the other side should know very exactly what they need and what they perceive as their needs in this connection.
Back in New York, Dr. L'Esperance responded.
The Chinese think it's what China needs. And therefore, if they think so, we have to go along with them, of course, and hope that they understand their medical system, as well as we hope we understand our medical system here in the United States.
Perhaps would it be possible to include in Project Orbis a more broad view of ophthalmology in developing countries? There is now one component, that is the technical and very sophisticated skills for one profession. I would like to see also included how we can deliver that technology further down the ladder to the population that really needs all those services.
What I think we have found in countries such as China and the other countries that Project Orbis has visited is a total new awareness of what can be done for the patient, of what the new techniques are out there.
It may be, but if we look at a corneal transplant where the patient has had trachoma or vitamin A deficiency, that case represents a failure of the previous action that should have been taken. A case of corneal transplant in a trachoma patient should never occur if we start early enough to treat the disease and to prevent the complications from the trachoma.
The danger for me is in overemphasizing one high technology aspect of the whole specialty, while another dimension, which is the population dimension, the public health dimension, the epidemiological dimension, is slightly neglected. And this is where the problems are.
It's just that it must not give the impression that the problem of blindness or blindness prevention in a developing country has been solved only by this. It's a good stimulus, but it must be complemented and followed up.
It isn't easy to assess Project Orbis, to know if its high technology can be useful to present-day China, to know how far Project Orbis is really worth the effort, even though it might seem successful on a one-to-one basis.
I think the most important thing is to see the reaction firsthand. I personally not only did operations that they had never seen before in China, and felt that they could do after we left those particular procedures with the technical instruments that they had. But also, I learned quite a deal from the Chinese.
One possible way of assessing Project Orbis is by seeing if the visitors themselves learn anything which they can use. Project Orbis claims to be a two-way learning system, that not only do the Orbis doctors teach, but that they also learn from their hosts. Indeed, the Chinese demonstrated an acupuncture anesthesia operation on Orbis. The doctors are inserting needles 5 millimeters deep into acupuncture points related to the eyes. Here, they're using two sets of points, called the Zhangju and the Ta Ya. By twirling the needles, they start to activate the anesthetic effect, and they keep this going by connecting the needles to an electric current for the duration of the operation. Half an hour previously, the patient was given 1 gram of sodium pentothal as a relaxant and a 0.5% solution of Decaine to soothe the very outer surface of his eye. This is an operation for strabismus, or crossed eyes. The eye muscles must be cut and then re-sewn so that the eyes can be properly aligned. In this type of operation, acupuncture anesthesia is a great advantage because the eye can still move and the surgeons can continuously check and adjust their work. Under Western anesthetics, the eye muscles would be paralyzed.
She's making a hole, a tiny hole, on the Tinam's capsules in order to insert a strabismus hook into it.
There are various theories as to why acupuncture anesthesia works. One theory is that endorphins, morphine-like chemicals, are generated by the acupuncture action. Another theory is that the needles work on the nervous system to bypass pain sensations.
Yeah, a hook. Strabismus hook is put beneath, underneath this muscle. A buttonhole is made already.
我现在是给他打一个活结，我想在手术台上呢观察下他眼睛正了没有。
She's going to tie a stitch, but not a permanent, just a temporary stitch, because the operator would like to check the eye during operation. So she's going to tie just a temporary knot, not a permanent knot.
This knot will be adjusted after the patient sits up to have his eye alignment checked, partway through the operation. Acupuncture could be useful in the West for this type of surgery. For if anesthetics have paralyzed the eye, the results can't be assessed until much later. And often, in the West, a second operation is needed to make the final adjustments to the alignment.
那你这摇眼睛没太紧很好了，那就看见这个眼睛呢，就当我不盖，从不盖到盖的时候呢，它从外向内长。
I think the point is that the acupuncture operation, we probably would not incorporate 100% into our armamentarium of surgical procedures. However, I think any of these procedures that have gone on for 300, or perhaps in the case of acupuncture for over 1,000 years, we have to look into these and to make sure that we're not overlooking something rather simple. And perhaps this might be the way to do certain procedures. That's where the interchange comes in.
Nevertheless, this remains only a demonstration. And while it might be a stimulus to the West to look further into acupuncture, it isn't proof of the specific usefulness of Orbis, one way or the other. Yet what about the end results of the Orbis doctor's surgery? Won't the obvious success of Orbis operations demonstrate the significance of the project to China?
She had a cataract.
Yes.
And we did a cataract and implanted an intraocular lens.
Yes.
Now, the vision over here was good. In this eye, she could only see to count your finger. See, that's faster because we implanted the intraocular lens.
Yes.
If you had to wait to fit glasses, it might be 2 or 3 months before she would see. Isn't that right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So that's the reason we like in America these intraocular lenses.
So she is very happy now.
Our patients like to have immediate results. You know, and she has an immediate result. In just 2 days, she's seeing as well out of this eye as she does out of.
Ironically, this particular surgery points up the inappropriateness of Project Orbis in China, as well as the chasm which exists between Chinese reality and the attitudes which some of the Americans bring with them. The Chinese just do not have the precision instruments for successful lens implant surgery, which might help some of these people to see. Now, Project Orbis demonstrates another elegant operation, a corneal transplant. The doctor is using a motorized trephine to make a precise incision around the cornea. This is an unusually high-technology instrument, even for Americans. We can hardly assess this as an effective skills transfer appropriate to China's key needs in combating blindness. A successful cornea transplant requires good instruments, even for simply cutting away the damaged cornea. It also requires a backup infrastructure of an eye bank system and intensive follow-up care of each patient to control the immune rejection process, care which few third-world patients could individually expect. But if Project Orbis does fail under this type of assessment, perhaps it's the wrong assessment to make. Perhaps we're missing the real significance of Orbis. Perhaps Project Orbis needs to be assessed in a totally different way altogether.
It is true that most of the information that is transported, this hands-on transfer, is for surgical care or therapy, the managing of disease that's already present. And the great needs for blindness in the world have to do with prevention. On the other hand, making a population and a government aware of eye as a problem and what can be done for blindness, even when it's present, has a tremendous impact on the interest in prevention.
To assess Project Orbis by how well it transfers complex surgical skills is probably to miss the real impact of the project entirely. Its success must lie in what it leaves behind, in a heightened awareness of what is medically possible, in a seed from which the Chinese might adapt the possible to their own needs and means. Orbis doctors operated on this child for congenital glaucoma. But it wasn't so much the operation which was significant. The real significance was that she was spotted and diagnosed in the hospital by the Orbis doctors.
Did you explain to the mother that the operation went very well?
Glaucoma isn't easy to detect without expensive instruments to measure the pressure in the eye. Instruments the Chinese cannot afford in sufficient number.
Explain that the operation went very well and that the child will probably do fine, but that we won't be operating on the other eye on the airplane.
Yet this Orbis operation might spark a campaign in China to develop a cheap instrument for mass glaucoma screening appropriate to Chinese capabilities, essential preventive medicine, with which the Chinese could fight their own battle against blinding glaucoma.
可能也要做手术，但是不一定呢，到飞机上做，也可能留在我们医院做。
But if people are attuned to eye problems in general, per se, I think that transference of interest into prevention is a natural sequence. So I feel that Orbis is helping attract attention to the eye disease and blindness, and therefore encourage preventive measures, which are something that the government and public can take care of.
This man was taken care of by Orbis.
It's good, huh? It's clear. He had a corneal transplant and a cataract with an intraocular lens.
Yes.
Now let's see how he can see.
嗱，睇下幾隻手指，你用手比。幾個
Okay.
His reason is 0.1.
But for China, an individual success is not the point. Yet to restore sight to many of their citizens, the Chinese authorities might now devise a way to develop a cornea eye bank, adequate instruments, and post-operative care, different from the American system, but appropriate to what China can do for today and for the future.
Yes, it is. 谢谢你。Thank you. 没什么。That's all right. Now,
If the 1,000 million population of China, laboring toward its goal of modernization, is going to be one in which blindness might be further controlled, Project Orbis could be a catalyst.
汤姆。好。Thank you. 没关系。That's all right.
This is the young man of 21 from whom we removed the metallic intraocular foreign body with an intraocular magnet.
This man is lucky. He will see again with both eyes because of Project Orbis.
Now the eye looks very quiet.
昨天做了手术，现在眼睛
When I
非
look
常
at the
好。
fundus here, if he looks down to the right, please.
我现在看他的那个眼底，你看上面。
The lens is crystal clear. There's no hemorrhage in the vitreous. There's no retinal detachment, and there's a good freezing reaction around the area of from where the.
Tomorrow, more Chinese might see at the hands of Chinese doctors, because Project Orbis has succeeded in leaving behind a sense of the future, while the visit might equally have brought a sense of reality and humility to those doctors who made the trip to this ancient land.
And I personally can say that the greatest asset that I can take away with me from China is something that I see happening daily, and that is that the Chinese people, and especially Dr. Mao and Dr. Chen, have a certain way of making an individual, whoever he is, however important he's supposed to be, of making that person feel very important, very equal, and very special. And for that bit of learning, I thank you, and for making us feel very, very special. Go ahead, Bob. Can you proceed? You see. You see?
摸唔到車啊！摸唔到番茄啊！
You see? Go ahead. One. Come. Any more? Here. Come here. Come. 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 Come
The material on this video cassette is protected by copyright. It is for private use only, and any other use, including copying, reproducing, or performance in public, in whole or in part, is prohibited by law.